talks from the crypt.
I'm just looking at all these images, feeling like I'm home.
Yeah, right. And there's Dream Warriors right there, the syringe gloves.
Oh yeah,
right behind Freddy.
One of my very favorite things is that the image of syringe that was right out of the darkest corner. I didn't even know I had coming, and Darabont wasn't quite sure about that idea when I happened to come up with it.
Yeah,
he kept us on track.
I feel like it was the first time I ever saw Freddy's gloves being changed.
I wouldn't have done Elm Street 3. I mean, this is the whole story of Elm Street 3, but I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't going to take it further.
Yeah.
And I loved what Wes did. It blew my mind. And there were politics happening within New Line with Wes. I had no idea. No one told me. So I thought, this is going to be great. I get to work with Wes Craven. And I didn't really get to meet Wes until further on in the process because there was some tug of war going on about something to do with the rights. I had no position on it and still don't to this day, but God bless Wes Craven for coming up with the whole Elm Street concept. And I really thought I could kind of break the chains after Elm Street 2 reverted to a little more edging towards slasher when I thought Wes's idea of going into dreams was so terrific. Mm-hmm. How could I take that farther?
Right.
So I was constantly getting Bob Shea to give me a little more. I was always moving the yard line further on what visually we could do with Freddy. They were most terrified of me putting Freddy in a tuxedo without his hat and everything.
Yeah.
No, that was, for some reason, it looked terrific.
Yeah.
For some reason, that scared them the most.
Well, I think 3 is universally everybody's favorite sequel.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. I respect everybody who did Elm Street. You got to understand that. So I even now see things in 2 that I didn't see, but I think we were all a little disappointed in 2. I was as a fan before I got involved with the company, because the one was so groundbreaking between what we call rubber reality, between dreams and reality, and how you can die in a dream. And I had just done Dreamscape with Dennis Quaid and Max von Sydow from the first script, which I co-wrote that got produced, where we had dealt with dying within the dream, within a dreamscape. And I wanted to bring some of that into the Elm Street series.
Right.
And go further with the dark comedy that Robert was so good at.
Max von Sydow, he was in The Seventh Seal. When I saw him in Dreamscape, I was like, oh, shit, Bergman. I love Bergman.
We got Max von Sydow and Christopher Plummer.
Yeah.
And Dennis Quaid on the upswing of his career.
Now, is that where you met Frank Darabont, or did you guys meet on Hell Night?
No, we met on Hell Night. I mean, I don't know if Frank likes this story, but he was a camper driver, and he was always late. I thought, who is this guy smoking little dark cigars who never gets the camper there on time? And the wardrobe girl said, no, he's really a great guy and is a good writer. So I was literally considering maybe we have to replace him. But it turns out he was writing all day, or we were night shooting. So, he was doing 24-hour shifts. And I read some of his stuff and I said, this is great. Let's work together. And I dragged him out and we wrote weirdly, it was kind of a comedy, a youth comedy, but then we got right into horror writing together.
Well, he's written probably one of the greatest screenplays I've ever read. I've heard you say it on record before too.
I told it what Frank and I used to do was true co-writing. We rewrote the Elm Street 3 script. I think we had like 11 days or something. Maybe it was 7 days. We didn't have a lot of time. And so I got us a cabin in Big Bear and we just jammed it out on 2 desks. And it was a wonderful experience. We'd already written together. We'd already written the Blob script together. New Line did not want to do the Blob, but they said, we're looking for a director for Elm Street 3. So that's how I was introduced to it. So it was like, if I could fix the script for Elm Street 3 with the problems they perceived, and I happened to agree where it should go, then they would let me have my first time directing gig.
Right.
So I said to Frank, come on, we're going to go write this script in a really short time, and I've got some great ideas. And Frank is just terrific. Later in our career, not too much later, we were rewriting a piece for Universal. Similarly, I think I was meant to possibly direct it. And Frank, in the middle of the experience, Frank asked me to read Shawshank. And he said, I'm about to lose the rights to this script. And it's a Stephen King novella that I hadn't heard of. And I said, well, let me read it. And it was the best script, or maybe the best anything I'd ever read. It was really that good in the current draft I was reading for Frank at that time. And I told him, you go, I'll finish this writing job myself. go back to L.A. He was about to lose the rights to it. I go, work that out with Stephen King. People were already trying to buy the script from him. And I said, this is your directing ticket. You've got to do this. So thank God I recognized what it was and was supportive enough and rooted for Frank the whole time. And it's a wonderful movie. I know everybody knows that.
Well, and how does one acquire the rights to something like that? You know, because you went and acquired the rights to the Blob. I mean, how did you do that?
I did it more like the Chicago hustler young man I was at the time. I had no reason to believe they would do it for me. I just was searching for what rights I could get virtually for almost nothing because I didn't have money.
Yeah.
But I had enthusiasm, and I searched out Jack Harris, who lived in a beautiful Malibu community, and nobody was chasing him for the rights to the Blob, to my luck, and I talked him into it, to his credit. And Jack's passed away now, but thanks to Jack and his family, they trusted me, and I said, look, I'm going to write, you don't have to pay me anything. You're the producer.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to direct this and I'll get you a great script and we'll put it together. And I was true to my word. We did get the movie made, and I would say Elm Street 3 was probably more fun because the physical parts of the dreams and the effects was not CGI then. It was all practical effects and film. I had a really strong idea how to do them. On the Blob, we really had no clue how to make the Blob look like the Blob until we were really out there. It didn't work out in prep as well as I'd hoped. So we were on the set faking it.
I heard everybody tasted the Blob on set.
You went home having absorbed some Blob. The magical Blob element at that time was Methicil. Okay, so Methicil was used as a milkshake thickener. I heard secondhand, I don't know if it's true, but supposedly they used it at McDonald's at that time to make your milkshake thicker.
And is there a taste?
Not really. It's just like thick water, essentially. So it may have been a little bitter, as I recall, but by the time we wrestled around with Blob elements, which we called the prom dress, because it was basically big silk pillows sewed in an interesting fashion.
Wow.
And for different pieces of the Blob, depending on how big the Blob was that day, we would pump it full of this Methicil with Tony Gardner and Kevin Yeager and a great crew. I think Hoyt Yateman, all these people went on to do great things that I'm mentioning. But there was barely a plan, and the stuff was really heavy.
Right.
I mean, heavy weight. You know, you could really hurt yourself. You could also slip and break your neck. So there was a lot of tricks to all that.
Well, that makes me curious how you guys pulled off some of those practical effects, because this thing, you know.
There's a story to every one. There's a story to every design. When we took out trying to think of the actor's name, there's a wonderful kind of the crime of young people having sex, which is always a great horror theme. Mm-hmm. When the character has his girlfriend nod off and he's bad enough to start to try to unbutton her blouse and gets blobbed. we got the car on a gimbal, and we were rolling the car for the key shot. Some of those were basic puppetry, coming out of a doll body. Not my favorite physical mannequin in the film, but the effect when we rolled the car, the audience can't tell. It looks like the car's standing still, but the blob goo, which was very heavy, rolls right over the victim, quite beautifully. And it was those were like one take deals,
right?
You know, it only would happen once. You couldn't recreate it.
Well, and I find it so interesting that New Line passed on it, and I wonder how they felt after it came out and how good it was. They were busy. Bob Shea and Mike DeLuca and the whole team, Sarah Risher, had a lot of good things going on. And I got to do the mask for them later, so I have no ill will with them. Right.
But I was trying to sell my goods. Let's do the Blob. And saying let's do the Blob prior to seeing what I was going to do, the Blob was not greatly respected. The original from the 1950s was cool, but very, very campy. Mm-hmm. And even though the concept is great classic horror, how simple is evil if it's this blob that will stop at nothing?
With no emotions. No
emotions. It's just, you can't blame it. It just keeps growing. And it reminds you of diseases that are real things. So it's like real things out of nature. So the concept was great. And there was something we use the word meta now. There was something the original Blob did that was very meta, which was the movie theater. So people back in the day were in a movie theater seeing something that was very scary to them, I assume back in the day, where people were in a movie theater watching people in a movie theater getting eaten by the Blob, which which was meta. It was just kind of breaking the fourth wall and engaging the audience in a very fun way. I think it's part of the reason. That and Steve McQueen, who's one of my very favorite iconic actors, introduced Steve McQueen. I kept hearing who's going to play the Steve McQueen part, and I realized while we were writing the script, the first character to die will be the Steve McQueen character. I needed to shock the audience with their own expectations. That kind of worked.
Well, and I love your logic behind it, because when you kill the main character like that, it's like nobody is safe.
Look, this goes back to Hitchcock and even, I'm sure, films before that. Hitchcock's Psycho, I believe was Janet Leigh, was a huge star at the time. And everyone keeps talking about the shower scene and the magical way he did and the shots are great, but it wasn't scary because of the camera placement, film students. It was scary because that was the biggest star at the time, and they killed her 20 minutes into the show. And then the audience was terrified because it proves there's a maniac at the wheel of this film.
Right.
It proves that no character is safe. You can't assume anything. It just makes the suspense so much more effective.